break down our must-start defenses and streams for Week 8 of the fantasy season. These are the defenses that are going to help you guys absolutely dominate Week 8 of fantasy football. We're going to kick the video off with the Atlanta Falcons. You're going to be at home versus the Miami Dolphins here in Week 8. Now, full disclosure, I have to record these videos before Sunday Night Football has been played, so I don't know how Week 7 looked for the Falcons or how they looked against the Niners, but what we do know is that the Falcons have averaged 7.9 fantasy points per game on the season so far. They have had some pretty poor defensive overall games when it comes to fantasy points scored, but ultimately they've been a solid defense all year long. They look great from a real-life perspective. They played very well in Week 6 with 10 fantasy points against the Buffalo Bills, against Josh Allen. So with the way that Tua Tagovailoa has looked as of late and the way that the Miami Dolphins offense looked this past week against the Browns, I think you have to feel good if you own the Atlanta Falcons, and they're very lowly rostered right now. I mean, probably because they were going up against the Bills and the Niners in the past 2 weeks, but this is a team that they're out there on the waiver wire. I think they are a top priority add in terms of streamers this week. You look at Tua this past week, 3 interceptions, and he had 3 interceptions the week before. He has a total of 6 interceptions over the last 2 weeks. The Falcons have to be one of my very favorite streaming options here in Week 8 of the season, regardless of how they look or don't look in Week 7 against the Niners. But the Falcons are out there. They're in a great spot facing a team who's a complete mess right now with a quarterback who's turning the football over at a very high rate. Falcons have to be a priority streamer here in Week 8 of the season. Next up, we have the New England Patriots, who are going to get the Cleveland Browns and rookie quarterback Dylan Gabriel here in Week 8 of the season at home. You got to feel good here if you own the New England Patriots. I know they've moved up pretty highly over the past few weeks. Roster percentage, they're at 89% rostered. We loved them last week. They were my favorite defense that we talked about in last week's video. They had 19 fantasy points, a forced fumble, an interception, a defensive touchdown, 5 sacks, and only gave up 13 total points. So you got to feel good this week. Back at home, and they get a rookie quarterback in Dylan Gabriel, who, I mean, isn't necessarily making like a ton of mistakes or anything, isn't having like a ton of turnovers per se, but he's still not playing at a high level of football. I mean, as a matter of fact, he does have 0 interceptions since he's become the starter for the Browns, but ultimately you got to feel good here. The Patriots are absolutely humming right now. They're playing great defense. They're at home, coming off of a big week. I think that they build upon that here in Week 8 of the season against the Browns. If you guys own the Patriots, keep rolling with them, and in the off chance that they're out there on waivers, they are a solid start overall here in Week 8 of the season. Next up, we have the Indianapolis Colts, who had 7 fantasy points this past week. They had 2 interceptions against Justin Herbert, but ultimately as the game went on, they gave up 24 total points and 445 total yards. They had to also have 3 sacks in this game as well, but kind of expected that against the Chargers. We didn't really talk about the Colts defense last week. We knew that this was going to be a tough matchup that potentially had a lot of points scored, but they still showed up for the most part, and they've been very good on the year. They're the defense too right now in terms of fantasy points scored. They sit around 56% rostered, so this is still a team that you guys can potentially pick up off of the waiver wire, and I gotta like them this week. They have to be one of the top defenses going into the week, facing Cam Ward and the Tennessee Titans at home. I mean, we have talked about Cam Ward and the Titans in video after video so far on the season. We want to start defenses against the Tennessee Titans, against Cam Ward. This past week, Cam Ward threw an interception. He has now thrown an interception in every game since Week 3 of the season. He's had some costly fumbles as well. So the turnover potential is absolutely massive for the Colts in Week 8. I think this front 7 is going to have a very good day. I think that overall they're going to turn the Tennessee Titans very one-dimensional, very anemic overall on offense. Not that any defense has really struggled with that this year, but I think this is going to be a really big week for the Colts against a divisional opponent. The Colts look like the best team in the NFL, for crying out right now. They are firing on all cylinders. They're not going to hold back against a rookie quarterback who is in the same division as them at home. The Colts are an absolute must-start defense here in Week 8 of the season. All right, next up we have the Chicago Bears, who come in at 49% rostered at a big Week 7 against the Saints. 14 fantasy points, 4 sacks, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery, 3 interceptions, allowed 253 total yards against Spencer Rattler and company. They now have double-digit fantasy performances every game this year, except for Week 2 against the Detroit Lions, where they had -4 fantasy points. So probably going to look at this matchup against the Ravens and not feel good about it. And I totally understand that, because we probably are going to get Lamar Jackson back this week for the Ravens. Now, obviously, if we get any sort of update this week that Cooper Rush is the starting quarterback, or even Snoop Huntley, if it's a backup quarterback for the Ravens this week and Lamar is not able to go, then the Bears become a must-start defense. But I still think sitting around 49% rostered, they're going to have an opportunity this week, even if it is Lamar Jackson and the Ravens are kind of back to normal coming off of their bye week. I still think they're going to have somewhat of an opportunity this week for a solid floor, pretty decent fantasy performance. They've had a total of 10 interceptions in their last 4 games as well. And in 3 of the past 4 games, they've had 3 interceptions in 3 of those games. Like, this is an opportunistic defense right now in the secondary. While they do give up a lot of fantasy points, they're also very opportunistic and find ways to get turnovers and takeaways. So I think the Bears, once again, they're not my favorite play this week if Lamar is back out there at quarterback, but I still think that they could be very solid. And if we, for some reason, don't see Lamar Jackson play here in Week 8, the Bears need to be rostered immediately as we approach the week. The last team I want to talk about is the Kansas City Chiefs, who are going to be at home this week against the Washington Commanders. This will be the final game of Week 8 on Monday Night Football. And now we're going into this matchup with the Chiefs coming off of a 13-point fantasy day against the Raiders. They had 1 sack. They allowed 0 points, completely shut out the Raiders, had a forced fumble, and only gave up 95 total yards. I mean, they didn't really have a ton of turnovers or anything, but they played amazing defense this past week and got you double-digit fantasy points. So now we look to Week 8, and we know that Jaden Daniels is banged up at the quarterback position for the Washington Commanders. At the time of recording this, we don't know how serious it is. We don't even know exactly what the issue is here. I've heard it's a hamstring injury, but this is not promising with Jaden Daniels, this being his 2nd injury on the season. And Marcus Mariota has filled in perfectly fine as the backup quarterback, but he did kind of struggle this past week coming in against Dallas, right there on the spot. And then now having to travel to Arrowhead, playing one of the best defensive coordinators in the league and the Kansas City Chiefs. This feels like a spot where the Commanders could absolutely struggle if Jaden Daniels misses Week 8. Now, once again, we don't know for sure that he's going to miss Week 8, but if he does, I think the Chiefs have to be a must-start defense once again. They were this past week, so they do sit at 76% roster. They moved way up in roster percentage this past week, but they might be out there on waivers. And if we see no Jaden Daniels this week, don't forget Terry McLaurin's banged up. Luke McCaffrey was able to return, but he got banged up this past week, and Deebo Samuel missed this past week as well. This team is hurting right now offensively. If we don't see Jaden Daniels play this week, the Chiefs are going to have another super solid day overall on defense. So I still think they are more than likely going to be a must-start defense here in Week 8 of the season. All right, and very quickly here, we will run through the rest of the schedule in case you guys are wondering why certain teams didn't make the video. Thursday Night Football, Vikings, Chargers. It's a good enough opportunity for the Chargers. Carson Wentz is, throwing interceptions and everything, but I'm done with Thursday Night Football. I usually don't talk about Thursday Night Football on these videos for various reasons, but after the Unk Bowl, I'm completely out on Thursday Night Football matchups in the defensive videos, unless it's just a screaming opportunity. I'm staying away from Thursday Night Football, point blank, period. Jets Bengals would be next up here, and I do think that one is interesting. I actually kind of like the Bengals defense potentially here, whether Justin Fields plays or not. As long as Garrett Wilson is out, I think that we can count on streaming defenses against the Jets, but I don't trust this Bengals defense. I think you could argue maybe there's some opportunity for the Jets defense here, but they have not looked great. And speaking of the Unk Bowl, Joe Flacco has looked great as well, so I'm staying away from this matchup. Bills-Panthers is interesting. I'm going to trust the Bills and Josh Allen coming off of their bye week to have a good week, but this Panthers defense is quietly pretty good, and they just had a pretty good dang week 7. But ultimately, I just can't trust them against the Bills, but I did think about them for today's video. Niners, Texans, kind of hard right now because I have to record these videos before Sunday and Monday Night Football, so can't get a full evaluation here. But if, Mac Jones plays in Week 8 as a starting quarterback, maybe there's an opportunity here for the Texans defense, but I just don't feel so great about this. Browns, Patriots. Once again, I will mention, we talked about the Patriots. The Browns could be an okay play here, but I don't know, man. The Patriots offense looks great right now. Drake May is humming. They're throwing the football very effectively right now. So I know the Browns are coming off of a big week, but I'm staying away from them here in Week 8. Giants, Eagles. I just don't want anything to do with this matchup. If it's anything like the matchup we saw 2 weeks ago, no thank you. And neither the Eagles or the Giants defense played well this past week, so just no thank you here. Bucks, Saints, once again, maybe there's an opportunity for the Buccaneers defense. A little bit difficult to evaluate before they've played in Week 7. But even then, they just haven't been a great fantasy defense. They are intriguing because they play Spencer Rattler this week, so they could maybe be a good floor play. But ultimately, I just don't trust this Buccaneers defense on a week-to-week basis. But they are one of the more interesting teams that did not make today's list. Cowboys, Broncos. Once again, the Broncos defense did not play well this past week against the Giants. And the Cowboys defense, we're never going to trust no matter what they do on a singular weekly basis. They've just been so bad overall this year. And you got to imagine both these offenses are going to come out and throw the football at a massive rate and put up a lot of points. Or, even if the Cowboys are not playing well defensively, they're going to come out and throw the football the whole time and try and put up points. So it doesn't feel like a great matchup from a fantasy perspective in terms of defensive special teams. Packers, Steelers. I mean, maybe there's something here, but the Packers defense has been absolutely disappointing. I'm basically done with them in these videos, and the Steelers defense got absolutely shredded this past week in the Unk Bowl. So I'm staying away from the Packers and Steelers, and that really wraps it up. So there's the rest of the matchups. If you guys were wondering why certain teams did not make today's video. And there you guys have it. There are my must-start defenses and streams for Week 8 of the fantasy season. Don't forget, guys, I'm answering any fantasy football questions in the comment section down below. So if you guys need anything whatsoever as we approach Week 8, please drop me a fantasy question. I'll get back to you guys as soon as I can. And while you guys are down there, it does me a huge favor, helps out the channel tremendously if you guys hit that subscribe button and that like button on the way out. And when the videos and playlists pop up on the screen as the week progresses, we're going to have everything that you guys could possibly need here on the channel to dominate Week 8 of the fantasy season. So make sure you guys go check out all the videos as they come out throughout the week. And with that, I'll say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.